For those who crave suspense and the thrill of the unknown, you're in for a treat tonight. Welcome to a journey that will make your heart race and your mind wander into the shadows. Tonight, I'm taking you somewhere where reality blurs with the unimaginable, where the darkness holds secrets you may not be ready to uncover. So, dim your lights, settle in, and brace yourself. We are about to descend into a story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Tonight's story is The Midnight Shift. I've been on the force for over 20 years, patrolling the quiet streets of our small town in India. It's a place where nothing much happens. At least that's what most people think. You see, I've seen my share of strange things over the years. Things that would make the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. I've dealt with everything, from petty thieves to desperate criminals. And I've always prided myself on being level-headed, no matter the situation. But nothing prepared me for what happened that night. I've always been the kind of officer who listens to his gut, who knows when something's not right, even if it's just a whisper in the wind. People around here know me and trust me. They come to me with their troubles, their fears, and I've always been able to help. Until that night. That night something shifted. Something cold and dark settled over the town. And what I encountered, well, it still haunts me. I still get chills thinking about it. It started like any other shift. The town was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles in your bones and makes you believe nothing bad could ever happen here. But just as the clock ticked past midnight, a call came in, a woman in distress. She had come into the station earlier that day, disheveled, her eyes wide with fear. I remember looking up from my desk and seeing her standing there in the doorway. Her hair was a mess and her clothes looked like she had slept in them. But it was her eyes that caught my attention. Wide, unblinking, and filled with a fear that seemed almost primal. She hesitated for a moment, as if gathering the courage to step inside. When she finally did, she walked up to the counter where I was sitting. Her hands were trembling slightly as she clutched her purse, her knuckles white against the worn leather. "Officer, please, I need help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It cracked at the edges, like she hadn't slept in days. I stood up and gestured for her to take a seat. "Tell me, what's going on?" I said, keeping my tone calm and steady. She sat down, but she didn't relax. She kept glancing around as if expecting someone or something to come through the door behind her. "It's been happening every night," she began, her voice still shaking. "At first I thought it was just my imagination. You know how the mind can play tricks on you when you're alone." She paused, swallowing hard, her gaze fixed on some point just beyond me, as if reliving the moment she was about to describe. "It starts around midnight. I hear someone trying to open the front door. The handle rattles just a little, like someone's testing it, seeing if it's unlocked. The first time it happened, I thought it was just a passerby, maybe someone drunk, mistaking my house for someone else's." She stopped again, her breath catching in her throat. "But then it happened again and again. Every night, always around the same time. When he can't get in through the front, he moves to the back door, then the windows. He tries each one, quietly, methodically, like he's searching for a way in. I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. But inside, a knot of unease was forming. Have you seen who it is? I asked. She shook her head, her hands gripping the edge of the chair now. No, I've never seen him. I've looked, but there's never anyone there. Just the sound of someone trying to get in. Have you checked your logs, your security system? She nodded, almost desperately. Yes, every night I double check everything. I even installed a new security system a few months ago. It's supposed to be the best. Cameras, alarms, everything. But it hasn't helped. I'm still hearing him. And last night was the worst. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I could hear him right outside my bedroom window. I was sure he was going to break in, that he had finally found a way. Her voice trailed off, and for a moment she sat there, trembling. I leaned forward, trying to project as much calm as I could. Listen, I said, my voice steady. I'm going to make sure you're safe. I'll come by a place tonight during my patrol, around the time you have been hearing these noises. I'll check every corner, every shadow. If there's someone out there, I will find them. And if it's nothing, well, at least you'll know for sure. She looked at me, her eyes still wide, but there was a flicker of something else there. Maybe hope or at least relief. Thank you, officer, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know what else to do. I just can't keep living in fear like this. You won't have to, I assured her, giving a small nod. I'll be there tonight and we'll figure this out together. You're not alone in this. She offered a shaky smile, and for a moment some of the tension in her shoulders seemed to ease. Before she turned to leave, I realized I hadn't even asked for her details. Ma'am, I said, I'm sorry but I didn't catch your name. Where exactly do you live? She looked up, almost as if she had forgotten to mention it herself. My name is Priya Mathur, she replied softly. I live in that old bungalow on the edge of town. Near the mango orchard? I nodded, recognizing the location immediately. It was a bit isolated away from the busier parts of town. A place where you could easily feel cut off from the world, especially at night. I asked gently, is there anyone else in the house with you? I mean family, friends, anyone who could stay with you until this is sorted out? She hesitated, her eyes dropping to the floor before she spoke. No, there's no one, she said quietly. I am divorced. It's been almost a year now. My husband, he moved abroad right after. We haven't spoken since. Her voice wavered slightly as she continued. I live alone now, except for my maid who comes during the day, but she leaves by evening. Most days I work from home, so it's just me in the house. I could hear the loneliness in her words, the isolation that must have been weighing on her. I nodded, understanding the vulnerability she must have felt being alone in that house night after night. All right, Priya, I said, making a note of it. I'll be there tonight. You can count on it. I reassured her again, hoping to ease some of the burden she carried. But as she walked out of the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much darker. Now she was calling, her voice trembling as she spoke. claiming that someone was trying once again to break into her house. She sounded more desperate than she had earlier at the station, her fear palpable through the phone. I reassured her as best I could and promised I'd swing by during the rounds later that night. Honestly, I thought I was just humoring her. These things rarely turned out to be anything more than someone's nerves getting the better of them. But something about her demeanor stuck with me. The fear in her eyes, the way she had clutched her purse as if it was a lifeline. I couldn't shake it. So there I was, just after midnight, pulling up to her house. The street was silent, unnervingly so. Not even the usual stray dogs were out. The air felt thick, heavy, like it was charged with something I couldn't put my finger on. It was the kind of night that made you feel like the world was holding its breath. I walked up to her front door and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time, and called out, "Priya, it's Inspector Sharma." For a moment there was nothing but silence. Then I heard the faint sound of hesitant footsteps from inside, slow and uncertain, as if she was afraid of what might she find on the other side of the door. The door creaked open just a crack, and in the dim light I saw her face. She looked even more disheveled than before. There was a tension in the air that sent a shiver down my spine. Whatever was happening, it had pushed her to the edge. Her hair was a tangled mess, her clothes wrinkled. "He was here again," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I heard him trying the doors, the windows. He's going to get in tonight. I know it." I tried to reassure her, told her I had been patrolling the area and hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary. But she just grabbed my arm and begged me not to leave. Said if I did, he would kill her. I'll be honest, I didn't know what to think. She seemed convinced someone was out there, but my gut told me it was something else. Fear can do strange things to the mind, especially when you're all alone. Still, I agreed to stay for a while just to calm her down. We sat in the living room. She didn't sit. She curled up on the couch, rocking back and forth, muttering to herself. I kept my eyes on the windows, but there was nothing. No movement, no sound. Just the eerie silence of the night. After a while, the quiet of the house started to gnaw at me. The only sounds were the soft ticking of a clock and Priya's uneven breathing. The longer I stayed, the more I began to feel like I was suffocating in that room. I decided it was time to leave. I told her I'd ensure the patrol officer kept a close watch on her house, that she should try to get some rest. But the moment I rose to my feet, she sprang up too, clutching my arms with a grip that surprised me. "Please," she begged, her voice tight with desperation. "Don't leave me. He'll kill me. I know it. I can feel it." I tried to reassure her, tried to offer some comfort. "Priya, who do you think is trying to break in? Is there someone you know who might want to harm you?" She stared at me, her eyes wide and glassy. And that's when I saw it. Beneath the fear, there was something else, something darker. Her voice dropped to a whisper, the words spilling out like a confession. "It's my husband," she said. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "But you said he moved abroad." She shook her head, her tears coming faster now, her body trembling. "He did. But he came back. I didn't want him to, but he came back. My mind was spinning, trying to piece together what she was saying. Priya, I said slowly, why would your husband want to hurt you? What happened? She looked down at the floor. Her voice was so quiet, I had to lean in to hear her. Because I killed him. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I just stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. What do you mean you killed him? I managed to ask, though my throat felt tight. She took a shuddering breath, her eyes distant, lost in memory. This day, last year, he was going to leave me. He said he didn't love me anymore, that he was moving on. I couldn't bear it, the thought of being alone. So I did something terrible. I made sure he couldn't leave me. I killed him. I was frozen, unable to process what she was telling me. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows in the corners stretching longer, darker. And now he's come back, she whispered, her voice trembling. He's come back to take me with him. A chill ran down my spine. Every instinct I had told me to get out of that house, to call for backup, to do something, anything. But I was rooted to the spot, staring at her as she stood there, tears streaming down her face. I turned my head instinctively, but the hallway was empty, just shadows and silence. My heart was pounding. Priya, stay behind me, I ordered, trying to keep my voice steady. Suddenly, there was a sound, a faint, almost imperceptible creak from the hallway. Priya's eyes darted towards the noise, and she let out a small gasping cry. He's here, she breathed, her voice barely audible. He's here. But when I turned back to her, she was no longer looking at me. Her gaze was fixed on something over my shoulder, her face twisted in terror. He's right there, she whispered, backing away, her eyes wide with horror. He's right behind you. I spun around, but there was nothing, only the darkened hallway and the cold, empty air. A sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut, plunging the room into darkness. The temperature dropped sharply, and the air grew thick, almost suffocating. My flashlight flickered on, the beam of light trembling as much as my hand. But before I could react, the light caught something, a fleeting shadow, a figure standing just at the edge of the beam. I swung the light towards it, but there was nothing, just the oppressive darkness pressing in from all sides. Priya's voice cut through the silence, a choked whisper. He's here. He's come for me. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Something was wrong, terribly, horribly wrong. I turned back to Priya, but she was gone. The spot where she had been standing was empty, her presence erased, as if she had never been there at all. Priya! I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. No answer, just the darkness swallowing up the words, the walls, the very air itself. And then in the suffocating silence, I heard it, a low, raspy breath, inches from my ear. Cold, too cold like the dead of winter. The breath lingered for a moment, then a voice, soft, barely more than a whisper, filled the air, sending a shiver down my spine. She thought she could escape me. I whipped around, But there was nothing there, just the cold, empty darkness and the lingering echo of that voice, dripping with malice. In that moment, I knew whatever had been hunting Priya wasn't bound by the rules of the living, and now it had me in its sights. If this story has sparked both darkness and curiosity within you, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like the video, and be sure to hit the bell icon for more echoing tales. Each week, strange and chilling stories await you right here. So, until we meet again in the next story, stay vigilant. And before you sleep tonight, don't forget to take one last look into the darkness.